Hello, Nook Reviews here, and today I'm reviewing PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, or more commonly referred to as PUBG. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe for more reviews like this. So, released on the Xbox One back in December 2017 as an early access title, the official release as a complete game occurred in September 2018, made by the PUBG Corporation. Now, PUBG is a battle royale shooter which we've all become very accustomed with, and was really the first one of these games to really explode in popularity. Similar experiences had been there before it with mods for Minecraft or Arma, but PUBG really is the game that kicked the genre into gear. The goal is to be the last man standing, surviving longer than the rest of the 99 players in the game. Everyone starts out with nothing, flying over the map, approaching from a random angle in a plane. You must decide where on the map you want to skydive and parachute to. Do you go for the bigger towns or cities where there is more loot, but with more danger, or a more secluded spot, where you'll be safer to begin with, but may not find yourself with a lot of firepower? As the time goes on, the map will be squeezed into a smaller and smaller playing space by a circular force field that randomly picks a section of available map every time the counter resets. It keeps all the players gradually moving towards each other and into conflict. Now, gameplay in PUBG is very tactical. It's a slower and more thoughtful game than most of its competition, and that's due to its more realistic style of play. Some of PUBG's marketing and trailers make the game look action-packed, quirky, top-speed fun. However, in reality, it's more often the complete opposite of this. But that's not a bad thing. What sets PUBG apart still is its intensity. Gunplay is hard, there's no getting around it. You can be watching a player run 30 meters from you and want desperately to take them out, but this can be very difficult without the right scopes, without the right positioning, and with the enemy dipping in and out of sight. PUBG is a game about decision making, and the consequences for making the wrong choice are brutal, swift, and more importantly, deserved. Whether to engage an enemy or not, is it safe to cross this open section of map? Should you take cover in this building? Will driving a vehicle put me in danger? These questions and countless more are asked to you constantly throughout a match. Its unforgiving nature will have you angry and frustrated, cursing the game for being unfair at times. In reality, rarely is it anything but your own poor choices that cause you to die. The ability to watch how you were killed by your opponent through a death cam is great in figuring out what you did wrong. Yes, sometimes the RNG nature to some of the shooting will have you losing gunfights you were pretty sure were stacked in your favour, but this is usually a smaller factor than you'd think. Whilst the unforgiving nature of the game is refreshing in some sense, there are problems with its approach. Because the cost of making one wrong move is usually so high, it can cause a lot of overly cautious play. It's not something that you can blame on the players. The game forces players to play like this. If you want to win the game, you will camp at times. You will be sneaky. The overwhelming advantage you can have over somebody is the element of surprise. Everything else, weapons, armor, equipment, pales in comparison. If someone catches you off guard, 90% of the time you're toast. And there's nothing wrong with this. It makes sense in terms of realism and with PUBG's harsh ethos, but it lends to a game with high intensity spurts interspaced with long lulls in action. Some might call this patient play, others might call it boring. That's not to say that running and gunning more aggressively isn't an option. Killing others is often the best way of securing the best loot, along with trying to fight off others for supply drops. But the more havoc you cause, the more people might be drawn to the gunfire. It's a risk you have to weigh up. Part of the problem is how loud you are. It is basically impossible to sneak up on anyone. People with headphones can hear even the slowest of crouch walks easily. The only way to be silent is to be completely still. This puts anyone moving at the disadvantage compared to the person around the corner scoped in waiting. It's something that seems to go against PUBG's realistic ideals. People can move quietly, and often this puts the campers in a much stronger position. Another problem I think the game has, in a similar vein, is the free look feature. Holding down the button gives you the ability to run in one direction and watch out for enemies 360 degrees around you. It's a feature that again takes away from this idea of the game being realistic. You can be stalking someone well, getting closer and closer, they haven't glanced in your direction once, and suddenly they dive behind a tree and scope in on you. Having to turn around physically to see behind you seems a lot fairer. For all these reasons and more, the game is unwelcoming to beginners. Starting out, you'll be destroyed again and again with few tastes of any kind of victory, big or small. Controlling your character isn't as intuitive as maybe it could be, and feels like piloting a small aircraft at first, rather than just a guy with a gun. Entering a fight against a capable player, it can be difficult to piece together everything you'll need to survive. Stance, going in and out of first and third person, leaning, quick selecting meds, selecting grenades, changing grenade stance, all may be needed at a rapid pace that just isn't easy to get anywhere near at first. And it isn't particularly easy to improve quickly either, due to the game's nature. Say you want to practice sniping, because you found one last game and you were terrible. Well, good luck finding a high quality sniper rifle plus an 8 times or above scope again for another 5 games. Because encounters with enemies or guns can be pretty random, it isn't as easy as saying, well, I'll just try again. Having said all of this, it's the challenge of PUBG that makes it addictive. You may have just been killed 20 minutes into a game and felt like all you did was loot, that it was a waste of time and question why you're playing. But then you find yourself searching and quickly back into that plane, ready to drop in again. This game makes you want to improve, makes you want to learn. For every one time you feel like you've been exploited, it just makes you want to learn what happened and then go do that to 2 people. Joy can be taken from this game in lots of ways, not just the overall victory. Killing your first enemy, escaping a certain death situation, an amazing long shot, correctly guessing a player's behaviour, it could go on and on. Soon enough, these small victories all start to happen in the same game and put you in contention. Lots of Battle Royale games claim to offer unique stories every game, but none do this as well as PUBG. Some of its maps are gigantic and you will constantly be approaching the land from different angles and presented with new situations. It's weirdly impressive just how normal PUBG's maps are. Most of the action takes place in natural environments that aren't over the top. It's real boots on the ground combat, forcing you to think about what's around you to use to your advantage. Games can be so different, from deciding to try and control a town, hauling yourself across open fields, desperately running from the enclosing force field, to slowly making your way through thick forest, picking off any unlucky players who aren't as careful as you. There's a range of map sizes, with the smaller 2 giving players a quicker and more action-packed game compared to the larger 3. PUBG can also be played in a squad of 4 or in duos. Here, the realistic gameplay and settings can be really used to execute some brilliant tactics. There's nothing more satisfying than a plan coming together. Suppressing fire, enemy spotting, ambushes, flanking maneuvers, all make the game feel even more like serious combat. Team killing, however, is on, and is very tiresome. Best to get together a group of your own friends. Whilst the ins and outs of gameplay can be debated in terms of merit, one thing is unforgivable: PUBG's performance and graphics. This game has been available on the Xbox One for years. It is often so ugly. When it's supposed to be realistic, add on to that how long they've had to fix it, it's embarrassing. For some reason, it often gets a free pass, but not from me. Horrendous pop-in and awful textures absolutely plague PUBG. Again and again you will jump into the map absolutely astonished at how bad it is. What's worse is when this begins to affect the gameplay. Stuttering frame rates, buildings that don't spawn, buildings that look like this and that you can't enter, glitching around, holes in the map, literally getting stuck inside of the walls of buildings. In this instance, I just had to leave the game. The same assets for buildings are used over and over again, and sometimes they're just empty corridors that make no sense. The fact that a full-price game would look like this on release is an insult, never mind years later. The bigger maps suffer the worst, with the smaller maps requiring less loading, avoiding the brunt of, but not all, issues. The game can look nice at times, especially wandering on your own through nature. Just don't look too closely at the edges. Dour colour choices dominate most maps, except one, Sandhook, where the pops of colour are refreshing. Whilst it's fair to point out the rendering challenge it's up against, it's also fair to say half the time it looks like a 360 launch title. Not good enough. Another insult is its version of a battle pass. A fully priced game, then charging to play its complete version is a slap in the face. There is no other way around it. To buy a game and then have to pay for extra content held back from us is something we should always be against. There are a couple additional modes other than the standard Battle Royale mode. Currently there is a Team Deathmatch mode, strictly first person however, that plays much like every other first person Team Deathmatch you've played, if a bit jankier. It is fine enough and it allows you to have a lot more gunfights quicker than you would have in the normal mode, but the decision to limit it to first person seems a bit odd considering how third person is the game's bread and butter. There's also a training mode which allows you to try out all the weapons in the game, all the attachments etc, and has gun ranges for them too, along with a driving course and basically every example of most aspects of gameplay. Whilst I like its inclusion, there is just no substitute for the real scenarios that you'll encounter in the main game, so its usefulness is very limited. Summing it up, sometimes the game can be slow, sometimes it can feel unnecessarily clunky. However, you will struggle to find a more intense, demanding, but rewarding shooter than PUBG. Constantly keeping you on your toes, its heart-pounding tension never ceases, as every single decision you make is as important as the last. One wrong move and it's all over, but you'll know inside that you can do better. Unlike other games, there's a real feeling of learning the craft here, that you can consistently climb the skill ladder of. It's that drive to conquer this unpolished, brutal game that sparks so much passion for it. What a shame it is then that the game has been allowed to still look and perform so terribly at times. Add to that the inclusion of microtransactions into an already paid for game and you have to wonder how much care there is for the players. Plans continue to add more onto the game, like the Team Deathmatch mode, but that feels a little tagged on as it is. You'll have to decide for yourself whether the slower, more purposeful gameplay is tactical realism or boring camping. I give PUBG on Xbox One a 7.5 out of 10. Have you played this game? What did you think? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. See you later.